Guess who's back?
We're
back again. 3 dudes back.
3 dudes.
Tell a friend. No, seriously, tell your friends. Tell your friends about this. Like us somewhere. Leave comments down below.
Like it,
subscribe. Send it to all your friends. We are 3 dudes in a record store. I am your host with the most, the Skip Bayless of music television, Greg Horn. Joining us as always, doing all the important stuff you can't see behind the camera, the metal maniac, Jason, and
What's
the
up,
man,
Jason?
the myth, the legend.
As far as I know, it's quite legendary.
What's up, B?
Another week.
Tuesday. Another hard weekend, bro. It was a rough weekend.
What happened?
I'm wearing purple in honor of Laker legend Kobe Bryant.
That was very hard.
And his very young, blossoming superstar daughter perishing. But 2 more notable names in the metal community also passed away. Sean Reinert, he was with Death for a little while. He played on the Human album. Brilliant drummer. He was also with Cynic. He passed away super early, way younger than we are. No history of drugs, no history of things like that.
That's
so
tragic.
It's really rough.
If he played on Human by
Bro, I know, right? That album is spectacular.
A master drummer
one of my
right
very
there.
favorites. And founding member and also a drummer from Corrosion of Conformity, Reed Mullen, passed away.
2 metal drummers in 1 week.
I know, right? You can tell how serious I am about this show now because I've upgraded my writing implements so I can take thorough.
Yeah.
Because we've got a peach of a
what are we talking about
topic this part of this week. We are going on to top 5 underrated guitarists any era. So the guys that maybe don't get, they might be in bands but they don't get the press.
I find this one interesting because I have a feeling we're going to diverge a bit, or at least not be picking the same artists.
No, I'm so excited. For those of you not in the know, it always works the same way. We are going to each go over our honorable mentions. Then we are going to read the Metal Masters list. Then one at a time from 5 to 1, from 1 to 5. Us and Jim Morrison are going to count down. We're going to do 1 iconic album, which I don't even know what mine's going to be yet. I'm still on the fence. 5 things that you need to come here to pick up. And then on to the next show, which we've already, for the first time ever, we planned out what we're going to do already on Thursday. Super excited about that one too.
That's right.
We're not going to let you in on that, but
we gave ourselves a little more lead time on this, but I have to say I didn't have a lot of time in advance, so last night was really, I was crunching.
Well, it's good because then it's fresh in your...
Yeah, it's fresh in my mind, but it's a tough one to wrap your brain around.
This is the first time I've ever done a list for this show where I built it from the top down. Normally I build it from the bottom up. I get my guys who I think are going to be honorable mentions, and then I start building my list. Yeah. This one I went, this guy's number 1, that means this guy's number 2.
I kind of had the names floating around in a little soup and kind of was testing my theories. And
how many did you have on your initial list before you started parsing it down?
Right off the bat, probably about 12. And then more kept coming to mind.
I had about 30.
Yeah.
Happy that the Metal Maniac has a few of the guys I was going to put on here.
I want to say something in advance, too, before we get into it.
I can't wait.
It's actually an apology. I want to apologize for not having more women in my list.
You mean right now?
In my list here. There was a lot of amazing female guitarists, and I will mention a couple.
Okay, but those are kind of...
I just apologize in advance for...
Okay, so if we're going to do apologies, then I apologize for last episode for having Madonna on my list. I'm sorry. She should not have been on my list. You know who should have been on my list? Rick Springfield. The working class dog. I totally overlooked his amazing discography, so I apologize for that.
Okay,
You ready?
that's fair.
You ready to jump in the pool?
Yeah, I'm ready.
Let's
to
do
jump
it.
in, man.
All right, I'll get started with my honorable mentions. My first honorable mention, one of the founding members of Great White, Mark Kendall. He tried to form Great White a few times. It was a couple other bands. Jack Russell was tabbed to be his lead singer. He goes to prison.
Okay.
Look up that story. It's kind of crazy. Gets out early. They were sending him letters. Hey, he's on a pop. They formed Great White. Very blues-based Sunset Strip band. Very underrated. Great solos. Great laying it down rhythm. I brought this album. It's the Great Zeppelin. It's their take on Led Zeppelin songs. It's completely phenomenal.
I remember this album coming out.
Yeah. Great pickup. You got to pick that one up. Out on a limb with a band you might not recognize, you might recognize. He was in Fate's Warning. He does some really great prog stuff with Fate's Warning first. Lead singer John Arch, and it's Arch Mathos. Jim Mathos is the guitar player in Mention. He progs out, he can lay it down, he writes songs. Everything you really want a guy to do, but his soloing is pretty phenomenal.
The total package.
He is a total package. This is, I believe that, it's Winter Ethereal. It's a really great record.
But there's a reason you pick him, because there's stuff he does that just really stands out.
My guys are kind of like all-around guys. Okay. They can write and craft great music. They can play solos. They can lay back. They don't... A guy I really wanted to put on this list was Vinnie Vincent, but I find that his solo output, he does too much.
Yeah.
He kind of takes you out of that rhythm of that song, where these guys are really in that, they're just laying in the groove, they know when to come on strong, they know when to lean off.
Yeah.
Great.
All right.
In that same kind of vein, I went Rob Cavanisti. I'm sorry, I'm way pronouncing that wrong. From Death Angel. He's the only consistent member throughout. He's the only member with their lead singer, who I can't say these names. Mark Osudega. They're the only ones to be on every single album. They got kind of derailed earlier in their career. They were up and coming. They were super young. They had a van accident that kind of took them off the rails for 10 years.
Early Death Angel rules.
They came back with like 4 spectacular albums. Another guy. He can write. He can sing background. He can lay in the cut. He can come with a monster solo.
There you go.
Really, really bringing it. Check The Evil Divide is one of my favorites. I tried to fit this guy into the top 5, but couldn't. Most people will know him as C.C. DeVille's replacement in Poison, very briefly before that fell apart. Richie Kotzen has a ton of solo stuff out. This is his stuff with the Winery Dogs, kind of a prog metal, rhythm metal super group.
Richie on there?
He is right there, smack dab in the middle. He has a very unique style, unlike some guys on Metal Maniacs list, where he doesn't play with a pick. He finger picks everything and just has a very unique style.
I was trying to, I'm not positive about this, but 10 years ago I saw Poison, and opening up was the New York Dolls. And I think Richie Kotzen might have been the fill-in guitar player for the Dolls.
He might have been. That would have been weird. I wonder if they mended those fences.
Maybe.
There was basically something where one of the members of Poison's soon-to-be wife or girlfriend and Ritchie were having an extracurricular. Another guy I kind of really wanted for my top 5, but I just couldn't get it. Hurt my heart too.
Yeah. Well, top 5's
Ty.
Big. Top 5 is big.
Ty Tabor from King's X. If you know anything about this band, you know how much I love them.
We touched on them in our Lost episode. So you'll hear about King's X later.
You might. I might just change up my...
You might.
You know, but he's another one. He plays very underrated. The core group, they're still together. They're still bringing it. He can sing. He can write. He can bring a monster solo. He can lay in that groove and let other members of the band really shine.
For real. Well, he's really respected in the technical guitar community.
Those
too.
that know, that.
You're going to see him in Guitar
fraternity.
Player magazines as one of the top guitarists, but does he get a lot of?
He doesn't get a lot of love in the public.
Talk? Not enough.
On this show, he gets a lot of talk.
Yeah,
Maybe he should come on the show and talk about it.
Indeed.
Those are my honorable mentions.
Good stuff.
Coming out hard.
And one of the reasons we're doing this is to inform people, inspire people. Whether or not you think these are worthy of the list.
Maybe turn you on to some new.
They're still worth
new
checking
music.
out. Maybe some people you haven't heard.
Yeah. What you got for me? What'd you bring?
I actually didn't bring any examples to show because I just have a list. I just wanted to rattle off some names, not spend too much time.
Cool.
On my honorable mentions, because the more I kept thinking about it, there's just so many brilliant guitar players, and of course, you out there watching are gonna have people that you're gonna say, why weren't they on the list? Or, these people were amazing guitar players, and it's hard to whittle down. There's the Jimi Hendrixes, the Jimmy Pages, the Jeff Becks, those
slow
people,
hand,
the slow hand. They are, at the forefront of people's conversations about great guitar players. So I'm gonna just name a number of guitar players that I think deserve to be talked about more. Let's start it off with the oldest brother of this two-brother duo, who really is the steady captain of this band, Malcolm Young from AC/DC. AC/DC wouldn't be AC/DC without him. Angus gets the attention. He's out there with a lot of moves. Angus is a ridiculous guitar player, but Malcolm's rhythm guitar is just understated, underrated.
I will not disagree with that.
All right.
He didn't get a lot of light shined on him because he wasn't out there playing the solos.
No, he was comfortable hanging back.
Burning the fretboards, but
he was comfortable hanging back and
without
just
that
driving
groove
the tune.
he's laying down, you don't have those amazing songs.
You do not have it. This guy I wanted to be higher on my list because he's really important to me, and I don't think that people recognize him for his guitar playing enough, but Kurt Cobain. He rips solos. He's a songwriter. You may not think of his guitar playing as much, but that's kind of my point. Next time you're listening to some Nirvana, just dial in on the guitar. He's a radical guitar player.
No comment.
Steve Stevens from Billy Idol.
I knew you were going to have someone on his list, and that's why I left him off.
He needs to be recognized. Leslie West from Mountain. He is just a bluesy acid rock jammer, and doesn't get talked about enough. I threw in Daniel Ash from Bauhaus, just because it's a different type of thing, and he's an edgy, angular, very unique guitar player. When you're listening to Bauhaus, tune into what Daniel Ash is doing.
You don't really tune into that band much for the instrumentality, if you will, of.
Instrumentally, that band is amazing. And,
I dig the Bauhaus.
Here's a completely different type of guitar player. Joe Pass. He was an acoustic jazz guitar player who, in his jazz mode, you could essentially say he shreds, but not like an electric guitar wizard would shred. He was just so dexterous, picking through these standard jazz tunes that he would play, and just makes it seem so easy. I apologize for not having more women in the list, because guitar is oftentimes just sort of seen as a man's domain.
An extension of your
perhaps
member.
You could look at it that way. But there are many amazing female guitar players out there. One of them that everyone should know about is Bonnie Raitt. One of the wickedest slide guitar players that's ever been.
Yeah, but I'm not taking anyone off my list to slide her into it. See what I did there?
Yeah, nice. This guy might have another career.
I might. I'm bringing down jokes.
We talked at length about Prince last episode.
Yes.
So we don't need to say too much. Just listen to Prince's guitar work. Here's one people should really know about: Eddie Hazel. He was a founding member of Funkadelic. Without him and Funkadelic, you would have funk, but you wouldn't have
The
the
Delic.
psychedelic acid rock.
Yeah, when you think of that band, it's kind of Bootsy Collins is the one that you.
Well, he came in later.
Yeah.
But so yeah, check out the first few Funkadelic records. Eddie Hazel did end up leaving, but at least their first 3 to 4 records, he's part of it, and his guitar work's amazing. I don't need to spend too much time on Frank Zappa, but he's a guitar player
Frank Zappa's a
beyond
musical genius.
beyond being all the other things you think about Frank Zappa. He is a wicked guitar player. Somebody I want to mention for the avant-garde, free-out jazz world, Sonny Shorrock. If you never heard of Sonny Shorrock, don't feel bad. He's not that well known, but he's been involved in some serious free jazz excursions. Another standout jazz artist is George Benson, who kind of came up after Wes Montgomery, pioneering electric guitar and jazz. George Benson takes it to another level. He's not going to get talked about as much, maybe because in the late 70s and early 80s he was kind of pioneering the smooth jazz world, but before that he was a significantly badass guitar player. John Chipolina from Quicksilver Messenger Service, of his era, of the late 60s.
Well, you were bringing out the obscure gems.
Yeah, I'm almost
today.
done. I'm not going to drag it out too long, but a lot of people rate John Chipolina as kind of an underrated guitar player. Tom Verlaine from Television. The debut album by Television was at the same time as early Talking Heads, Richard Hell and the Voidoids, the New York punk scene, CBGBs, and the guy is a really transcendental guitar player, kind of coming out of that post-punk kind of New York kind of artsy punk scene, but he could really jam and take it out there. Ritchie Blackmore from Deep Purple, not that underrated, but he's a god of guitar in my opinion, and
Yeah, he's definitely not underrated.
not underrated,
Ritchie
but
gets all the love.
but I do think that maybe he should be talked about more as really one of the pioneers of guitar shredding.
Yeah,
You know, I don't think we would have that shredding metal guitar if Ritchie
probably because he
Blackmore hadn't
fell
happened.
off the face of the planet with that whole Blackmore's Night folky kind of thing he does.
Kind of
with
lost a lot of
his
people
lady.
there, I think. Lost a lot of people
Yeah,
there.
no, okay.
And then I'll leave it at another amazing female guitarist named Arnie Stern, who's kind of still in the underground. She's kind of an experimental, arty guitar player, but she's wicked. She treats the guitar in a completely different way than you would expect, and she's done some really heavy guitar records, and so go check her out.
This is why we call him the encyclopedia, because he comes with those deep gems that you're just like, what
I'm
is
doing
that?
my best. I'm doing my
Very
best.
well, I liked it.
I could go on and on about guitar
I
players you
know.
should listen to, but we're really trying to hone in on who is a really
can't wait till
standout
we
guitar
do-
player that is
I can't wait till we
underrated.
do 80s Sunset Strip and guitar players. That's
I
okay.
know you're all
Let's
about
read
that.
Let's read the Metal
Too.
Maniacs
Definitely
list.
got to lay down Metal Maniacs
I
list.
left a guy off my list because I knew he was going to put him on. Pat Benatar's musical muse Neil Girardo.
Yeah.
He is awesome. Very slept on. Gets zero love. Another guy who plays with his fingers that you wouldn't quite think about as being an amazing guitar player, but Mark Knopfler,
Yes, indeed.
seriously talented musician.
Very unique.
Keith Richards, they get talked about, but maybe he doesn't get enough for, he's really,
Well, I'm not going to diss Jason for putting him on the list, but
and he
do
seems
people
to
not give
be
Keith
a
enough love?
million years old. Like that man he was old in the 80s when,
well, he kind of also went from looking young and handsome and cute to just all of a sudden he's
he's
this
a
old
vampire.
guitar player.
Muse's own Matt Bellamy.
Okay.
I'm not gonna go in depth on.
Yeah. Somebody I can't speak to.
I'm
so-
not a super duper fan of them, but Jay loves them, so that he's got to have
Yeah.
some kind of merit. And his number one, who you could have texted me last night, and I told you exactly who it was going to be. His love of all things, Lindsey Buckingham. And if you want to watch a dude in a band where you wouldn't think really allows their guitar player to kind of stretch, and when they do some of their stuff live and he's just thrashing a guitar with his, and again, doesn't play with a pick, he plays fingers. He's amazing.
So he's one of those guitar players that's an architect of song structure and giving the song what it needs. As
he can write, he can sing,
but then he really can step out.
He spent his whole career kind of building up other people. He doesn't really get enough credit. So yeah, I dig that.
Right on, Jason. Thank you.
The list coming strong with the list again. Speaking of coming on strong, this band is probably known, but you don't really know who's playing guitar because sometimes it has a revolving door of members.
Okay.
But if you like this Whitesnake album,
I know
it was
one of them
86 when it blew up.
I know one of their members that I love.
If you like this album, more than likely, your favorite song was written by John Sykes.
John Sykes.
Who after he was unceremoniously given his walking papers after this album, went on to form Blue Murder.
Yes, indeed.
Another great. They had 2 records. The second one was kind of but the first one was on
And they're
point.
kind of one of those underrated bands of that
they
era.
are. This album has like
Please allow
10 or
me
11
to mention
songs.
though, if it's okay.
He wrote them all.
He wrote them all.
Well, he had a hand in it.
I'm
I
not
shouldn't
surprised.
say.
I just wanted to interrupt to say that John Sykes also played in Thin Lizzy.
Yes,
Thin
I
Lizzy's-
wasn't going to put that on because I didn't know. I'm not a huge Thin Lizzy guy,
One of
so I
Thin
didn't
Lizzy's
know
best guitar
when
players, so yeah.
that era of Lizzy was. But yes, he did.
Yeah, probably not too long before.
He can sing. Another thing that people don't know, he's got a pretty good voice. Ray Gillen was going to be the lead singer for Blue Murder, and then they decided.
Who is Ray Gillen?
Ray Gillen was a very slept on, kind of almost session vocal kind of guy, but he formed this band called Badlands with Jake E. Lee after Jake left the Ozzy Osbourne band. They're
just
bluesy,
one of our favorite
hard rock.
One of our favorite bands.
His voice is just amazing. But again, Sykes can do everything you want a guitar player to really do. He can make the other people in your band shine.
Yeah.
He can come with monstrous solos.
Well, in
Still
my
of the
opinion,
Night, he wrote that song. That Adrian Vandenberg got the credit for being in the video, but that's this guy.
Who doesn't still rock out to Still of the Night if that comes on?
Yeah.
If you're in your car driving, Still of the Night comes on, or you're watching. Well,
Yeah.
you're not watching on MTV anymore, but
every time David Coverdale cashes a check for Here I Go Again, he got to kick some of that off to John Sykes.
Yeah.
So if you're not familiar with John, go pick up the first Blue Murder album. Go pick up this album if you don't already own it.
Look for him in Thin Lizzy too. You had to be great to be in Thin Lizzy, and I believe at the time he was in Thin Lizzy, he was in a dual guitar lineup
with Gorham. Probably
yeah,
another
Scott
guy
Gorham
who could have got on this list.
Scott Gorham.
All right.
Yeah.
So that's my 5
Nice
coming out swinging.
That's your number 5.
That's 5.
Right.
So yeah, do the math. Try to
Right,
figure out where I'm going. I can see the look on Jason's face where he's trying to figure out the direction I'm headed in.
I don't know if the phone is coming through there. The phone's ringing.
You're a popular guy. The show is making this place. People want to know.
It's lighting up the phone banks.
Right?
We need some.
There's people. I've seen your posts on Facebook. People want to come in here and be in a live studio audience.
Mm-hmm.
Not quite. Okay.
Not there yet, but all right. I don't want to take too much time for each of my picks, but I feel like there's stuff that so much that I can talk about. We're gonna start this one off. I've been loving this guitar player since I was about 15 years old. The first major band that he was in happens to be an inspiration for my second son's middle name. He was in a band called Zephyr from 69 to 71. His name is Tommy Bolin. Here's a Zephyr record if you don't mind holding
Oh,
it.
yes, always.
We'll
I'll
show
hold
that next.
you talk.
Just because the records are big.
Yeah.
If I had CDs, it would be easier for me to do both. But anyway, Zephyr was a bluesy hard rock band, and he joined this band after many attempts to form his own bands. This band really kind of kicked off his career because they actually got a record label deal. The band was really more about the lead singer, who was kind of a Janis Joplin-esque bluesy rock and roll singer. But so little bits of what Tommy could do would stand out there. So after leaving this band, I didn't bring an example for this next, but
That's his face, though. Yeah.
yeah,
Let's
these are his two
put his
solo
face-
records.
put his face
two solo
prominently,
records.
display his face.
Maybe I'll try to just run through this here. So after leaving Zephyr, he joins James Gang to replace Joe Walsh. So right off the bat, if you're the one who's tapped to replace Joe Walsh and James Gang,
No small feat.
and the record they made with Tommy Bolin, just one record, it's a great record. It's not a Joe Walsh James Gang record, but it is a great record. Then during that same time, after meeting this drum master, this wizard of the drums, Tommy Bolin appears on this just face-melting, blistering fusion jazz rock, funky jazz fusion rock record, Spectrum by Billy Cobham. If you never heard this record, get it. It's got Tommy Bolin on it. Then, after that, upon the departure of Ritchie Blackmore, he joins Deep Purple.
That's probably where most people are gonna be the most
Probably.
familiar with.
And
Was that like Mach 4?
something like that.
Is that was he in Purple with Coverdale and?
It was not
Glenn
with
Hughes?
Coverdale. It was Glenn, Coverdale and Glenn Hughes. And so he didn't have a long-standing run with Deep Purple, possibly partly because he died at the age of 25.
Super young.
Sadly died from a drug overdose. He liked getting high and partying. But in the time he was in Deep Purple, he released the two solo albums that we showed, Teaser and Private Eyes, which are kind of an amalgamation of everything he could do. Pop songwriting, bluesy rock, some standout guitar ripping, just everything.
He's another guy that if those in the industry and in the know dug him, but a lot of us civilians didn't quite.
I think he's probably just not known as much as some other heavy hitter guitar players. And another thing I was going to mention, Jeff Beck got into doing a couple albums, Blow by Blow and Wired, that are staple records of Jeff Beck's career and of this kind of a heavy fusion rock guitar playing. And Tommy Bolin is credited with inspiring him to do that. Playing on that Spectrum record by Billy Cobham, that really kind of set the stage for that type of stuff.
Beck is another monster that kind of gets kind of thrown
He could
by
have
the
been in the
wayside.
list, but I do feel Jeff Beck is hugely revered and talked about a lot.
I am kind of in your stratosphere right now with a guy that if you're of a certain age you probably know, but kind of left off the radar mainstream wise, but kind of always was underneath doing something.
All right.
Very, very early contributor to what they call the neoclassical style. I think maybe Yngwie Malmsteen-esque, the kind of stuff that he plays. He joined the Scorpions in the early 70s when Michael Schenker left to play in
now I know
UFO.
where we're going with this.
We're going Uli John Roth.
Indeed.
For those that don't know, the Metal Maniac and I are huge Scorpions fans.
I'm right there with you.
And I think he was the first one that I think I was like everyone else, where it was Scorpions were an 80s band. And,
Yeah.
and one of his uncles, I think his Uncle Greg, gave me this record
Wow.
and was like, go home and listen to this.
Yeah.
And my life was just like, what?
Where
Was I?
I did not get turned on to that in the 80s. I wish I would have.
Yeah, so he left. He ends up leaving the Scorpions in '78 after this tour, the Taken by Force tour. But if you listen to the Sales of Sharon,
Yeah.
you can see that classical style that he was bringing. Most people get a signature guitar. He designed his guitar.
Wow.
The shape, the way that the strings lay,
Yeah.
the pickups, everything about it isn't by chance. He does everything.
He really is a guitar
Just
player.
kinda-
People should know.
He's a guitar player's guitar player.
And you're talking about how he brought in that kind of neoclassical flavor, that approach. He also, maybe more so when people would see him play live, he gained a reputation and a nickname. Some people would refer to him as the German Hendrix,
Yeah,
because he would kind of get into that transcendental, free-flowing,
he was. I
jamming
think maybe
guitar style.
I don't know the whole background behind why he left or if there was animosity. I'm assuming it's over now because they did a concert somewhere back in
Right.
time where every single
Yeah.
guitar player from the Scorpions was on the stage at the same time.
Michael Schenker, Rudolf Schenker, Uli Roth.
And Matthias Jabs.
Yeah.
So 4 amazing players all playing the same song. It was really
Let's
awesome.
just say right now, Scorpions are an underrated band.
Yes, completely. And it's because it's hard to stay in the public eye and make amazing music. It's almost like sometimes there's a shelf life, and
Yeah.
some of their later stuff isn't super
it's
awesome.
It's a little up and down.
But their early stuff, if you're a fan of the Scorpions and kind of just maybe ignored
Yeah.
their '70s output, go back.
Yeah.
Go back to the '70s stuff.
They
and
actually
really-
originated in the late 60s. It's amazing.
Yeah.
They kind of were known more for the 80s, but they go back to progressive acid rock days.
And you have to give them credit for kind of reinventing themselves to stay with the sound that was big in the 80s. But
Yeah.
dive into their 70s
One
output.
more thing about the Scorpions. They're really part of the original architecture of heavy metal. Judas Priest, after Led Zeppelin and Black Sabbath.
Yeah, if they come out of Birmingham, England instead of Germany,
But they were one of
or
the first
having
groups to
a different-
really play a heavy metal style.
Yeah,
So there you go.
slept on, super slept on
Uli John Roth.
guy.
That's a
He
great
does some
pick.
solo stuff.
That was a
so.
great pick. All right. Man, so much I want to say about these guys. My next pick is John Mclaughlin. If you don't know who John Mclaughlin is and you think you know wicked guitar playing, you're missing out. He's an English musician. So where do I start here? He's a guitar wizard, but let's just say early in his career, he should be notably involved in many major jazz recordings. Just in the 1968 and 69 period alone, he's playing with Miles Davis on In a Silent Way. He's playing with Tony Williams' Lifetime. He's playing on Wayne Shorter recordings.
Just those two names, Wayne Shorter and Miles Davis,
Yeah.
shows you the technical ability of a musician to
Yeah.
have to play with those guys. Holy moly.
Oh my God. And so he played on In a Silent Way, but then he goes on to play on Bitches Brew, a tribute to Jack Johnson, On the Corner, Big Fun. Those are all huge Miles Davis groundbreaking fusion jazz records. Then he also recorded a duet album with Carlos Santana. He's performed with Stanley Clarke, did recordings with Jack Bruce. So the dude's a monster of guitar, and he was probably in Rolling Stone's 100 Greatest Guitarists list, but not high enough up on the list. Because if you see footage of this guy in his first group that he put together called Mahavishnu Orchestra. It's insane. He is, what's the best word for it? He's transcendental. He is just lost in where he can go with this instrument that he is a master of. And we already mentioned Billy Cobham that Tommy Bolin played with. Well, Billy Cobham was the drummer in Mahavishnu Orchestra. You also had people like Jan Hammer and Jean-Luc Ponty coming out of that group.
Hammer went on to do music scores, right?
Yeah, he did stuff like that. Yeah, he was.
He did a lot of the Miami Vice. Man, I love that show so
Yeah,
much.
I know you do, man. Yeah. Another album that I would urge people to seek out when diving into John Mclaughlin is a record that was kind of a one-off thing that he did. He had released one solo record in 1969, and then he gets together with Buddy Miles and a couple other people. I think he just had some studio time and needed to do a record for this label called Douglas Records. And he did a record called Devotion, and it is a mind-blowing record to me. It melts my brain. There is guitar work happening on there that is some of the heaviest guitar I've ever heard. And I can't really describe it to you. It's just psychedelic. It's like if Hendrix was playing on a Miles Davis fusion record.
Yeah,
and
that would have been amazing.
It's just crazy.
That would have been an amazing combo of greatness.
And so, just a few more notes. In 71 to 76, he had the Mahavishnu Orchestra. One final thing that is another reason that I just absolutely believe he is one of the greatest musicians and masters of the guitar of all time is between 74 and 78, he had a group called Shakti, where he had met up with Zakir Hussain, who was at the time India's premier tabla player, kind of took up the mantle after Alla Raka, who had played with Ravi Shankar. So those two meet, become friends, and they get the idea to do this East meets West fusion. And Mclaughlin then learns the Indian modal style and is really instrumental in fusing two different Indian schools of music, traditional schools of music, into one with Zakir Hussain, and also this just ridiculously cool violin player El Shankar, who was part of this group Shakti. Anyway, just check out John Mclaughlin. He's ridiculous. Needs to be higher rated. Oh, we didn't show any of the stuff. Here you go.
Let's pick that one. That one looks good.
Yeah.
Man, you thought the two metalheads were gonna say Mick Mars, didn't you? No, man, we're bringing nuggets of wisdom. Bringing the good stuff. You just can't do albums.
This is essential right here, Birds of Fire.
You can't really do albums like this anymore. Like, this would never pass muster on. Like, what are you trying to say with that?
This literally is how your brain feels when you listen to this record. I don't know how to describe that image. It's just kind of acid trip, maybe.
It was hard for me to make a list and not have 40 shredders on there when I kind of lean towards that style more than maybe like a blues. I tried to make my list all things, and I tried to be just out there enough to not bore our audience with the so I'm gonna bring it back to the strip. And you posted something on Facebook or Instagram where it was the entire set of Beavis and Butthead.
Yes, indeed.
And Beavis and Butthead is one of the reasons why this band is so hated. For those of you who don't know, Beavis and Butthead had this goofy kid at their school. So Beavis and Butthead wore AC/DC and Metallica shirts. And the goofy kid that got picked on that was the dork that nobody liked, wore a Winger shirt. But let me tell you something about
And
Winger
this
is
makes it
better.
into your top 5.
Makes it in the top 5. Winger is better than you give him credit for. But bigger than Winger, the band, is Reb Beach,
Okay.
the monster shredder on this band. He's now currently playing in Whitesnake. He's an accomplished studio musician where he did stuff for Roger Daltrey. He did stuff for Shaka Khan, for the Bee Gees, for Twisted Sister. For a while, he was in Fiona, her backing band, which I believe she made it to my list of honorable mentions from our Lost episode. In that backing band, before she got her big record, Heart Like a Gun, he meets Kip Winger. They form Winger. He briefly replaced George Lynch in Dawkins.
Really?
He can shred, he can write, he can lay in the cut, he can bring.
Yeah.
And for people that really like that 80s kind of hard rock, kind of metal, he can do all these things. And they don't get a lot of love because, you know, Kip Winger, let's be honest, he gets a lot of hate, and I understand why. I'm not going to lie. I was one of those guys. I was like, F Winger, like that's a joke. But when you really put these records on, you just let them spin, and you listen to what this guy can do and who he's played with and how much of a musician he is.
Right.
You'll really fall in love with his style and his ability.
There's a lot of resistance to the sort of late period hair metal, glam metal of the 80s.
There was.
Bands like Slaughter and Winger and
Warrant. Slaughter's sucks.
Well, okay, I'm grouping them.
But I know where you're going, and I agree.
And at some point, we're gonna do an episode talking about stuff like that, because I think they get maligned all too often because they're not taken for what they really are, which is serious musicians making rock and roll music of a certain era.
You wanted to.
And they get compared to other
You
stuff.
wanted to keep people to a certain level, and then you also demeaned them for doing it.
Yeah.
So, you know, if
We
the
do see the
most
humor in some of this
popular,
stuff.
you know, the most popular Sunset Strip bands, you know, Motley Crue can't play to the level of Winger. The musicianship in that band is nowhere, maybe aside from the drummer,
But this was the 80s.
yeah, he's
You know, playing big venues, getting videos in rotation on MTV. These bands, they wanted to write big tunes, and
they did. They got great songs.
now
they
was Kip
don't-
Winger
he was
coming
the-
from a ballet career? Didn't he have some moves when he played his bass guitar?
That might have been part of the reason why he gets
Pirouetted
disrespected. Yeah,
But
he was a pretty man. I mean, you gotta go with what you know, and if
if people you know, had some disdain for this stuff at the time, I hope people go back and reevaluate. This is great music, man.
Kip can actually sing and play.
Yeah. The song
stepped in
17 was a little questionable, but
It's super creepy and edgy now, like where you're like, that's cringy. I can't.
yeah.
I gotta
we won't
press
go
skip
into
on that one.
to the lyrics.
There's no
of that
way I
song.
want to be driving around Eureka with that blaring out of my truck, and then like, oh, I'm going to prison. Like, no, it's not good. But bueno,
Oh man. So what?
turning the page.
Okay, you were at
But I
number
don't
three?
want you to
You
see.
were at
That was my
number
number
three.
3.
Yeah.
I got to
number
cover
3.
because I don't. My 2 are so out there, and you're gonna be shocked.
Okay, I feel like
Shocking the world.
I feel like I'm getting kind of esoteric here too, but maybe that's just my nature.
Maybe I'm a contrarian. You're a esoteric.
Yeah,
That's why we make such a good combo.
we make a great combo. All right, this next guy, I you know, he was swirling around in my honorable mentions, but ultimately he found his way into my top 5. This guitar player, to me, is underrated. It's not revered enough, and he has a lot of credits. Oh, hey Jason, would you mind grabbing that? We got a delivery from UPS.
delivering stuff that you need to come down here and get.
Yeah. If Jason didn't answer that, we wouldn't get the package.
I open your door, dude.
To turn it the other way, you'll hear it click.
This way?
Yeah, and then the bottom.
Oh, the bottom.
Yeah. Sorry, buddy.
Yeah,
Hey, we're shooting live.
that's right.
We're shooting
We're
live.
not even gonna edit any of this out. We're just gonna roll
Yeah,
it.
it's all good. Thank you, dude. All right, Adrian Belew. You know who Adrian Belew is?
Well, I know we could do an entire episode on underrated musicians who played with Frank Zappa.
Yeah, indeed. So that's really kind of the beginning of Belew's career, let's say. He was tapped by Zappa at some point. So touring with Zappa. But then one of the most significant things where you'll actually see Belew playing with Zappa didn't come out until 1983, but it was a 1977 tour film called Baby Snakes. And if you haven't seen that, if you like Zappa, if you like Terry Bozzio, if you like other freaks that were in Frank Zappa's band, Baby Snakes is a great concert film.
Just for those people who don't understand just how accomplished you had to be to play in that band, he put Steve Vai through his paces to be in that band, and he wasn't a slouch. You had to be an incredible musician to play with him.
He put everybody through the paces. I don't know that Frank would hire people and fire them. I think they just had to.
Yeah.
Just had to step up their
And then
game.
if you wanted to go do other things, he gave you his blessing. And
I don't think he was that kind of whip cracking band.
No, but you had to be.
Yeah, you had to want
accomplished
to play on that level. So, after playing with Frank Zappa, he joins with the Talking Heads. So, he records with the Talking Heads on this album that also had collaboration and production from Brian Eno. This is considered by many to be the Talking Heads' kind of apex of their art, kind of their magnum opus record. And then what happens is Belew tours with Talking Heads in support of that album. And is that upside down? You got it. And if you go on YouTube, you can look up Talking Heads Rome 1980. That's one of the concerts filmed in its entirety, where you will see Adrian Belew doing stuff on the guitar. That is the reason I put him in this list. And then immediately following that, he
we might get into some stuff.
He continues doing the same kind of wizardry with the band King Crimson. In let's say the third installment of King Crimson, they kind of went through several different incarnations throughout their career, always helmed by Robert Fripp, who's also a guitar player that could have made this list. A brilliant guitar player, but you can watch the live Three of a Perfect Pair tour, which was, I think, from around 1983 or 84. There's another.
I saw them play with Dream Theater.
Oh man,
it was pretty rad.
I never got to see him, unfortunately, but Belew was probably the longest running member besides Fripp. He stayed with the band for a long time. Okay, so the reason that I find him so amazing is he's more of a technician. He can play with a lot of feeling. He can be very fluid, but he can also play really percussively, staccato type rhythmic guitar playing, and is just a master of effects. So he can make his guitar sound like anything. He can play it like a MIDI synthesizer keyboard, and
some
talk with his
atmospheric
guitar.
qualities,
Atmospheric, sound effects. So when you watch some live footage of him with King Crimson, he's very complimentary to what Robert Fripp is doing, and I just think he's an unsung radical guitar player. So let me just mention a little bit more. He worked with Zappa, Talking Heads, Tom Tom Club, David Bowie, Laurie Anderson, Tori Amos, Nine Inch Nails. Worked with Cyndi Lauper on the True Colors album, and even worked on Graceland by Paul Simon. He's a guy that was sought after by a lot of other musicians to bring his talents to. So with those kinds of credits, that's why I felt he belonged
Again with
in my top 5.
I mean, let's jazz up the. It's kind of hard to encapsulate what they're trying to do on an album cover, though.
Yeah, you know. They mean something to them.
It's
I don't know.
Far out in left field as you are, I'm gonna bring it. I'm gonna rein you back into the infield with my number 2.
I don't think I'm that far out, but
I don't have a copy, but unfortunately, my number 2 had his life ended when he was young. I'm not sure if he was a member of the 27 Club or not, but his band was on a unique musical progression, and then he passed away. Someone else took the reins, their bass player, part-time lead singer, and then took them into the 80s. And if you know Chicago, you probably know their 80s love song ballady output. But if you go back to the Chicago Transit Authority days,
Indeed.
the early days,
I see what's
Terry
happening here.
Kath
Yeah.
was a brilliant guitar player. Founding member of Chicago, died in '78. Changed the entire style of the band to much where there was an internal power struggle. Peter Cetera kind of got rid of the horns, which made them so unique. I don't know if this is true. I really want it to be true, but it is rumored that Terry Kath was Jimi Hendrix's favorite guitar player.
Wow.
But if you're wondering, kind of like I don't really know.
Yeah.
You can go onto YouTube when you're done watching this amazing show and click live versions of like 25 and 6-4 and all those early Chicago classics, and you see him just rip solos out. He was the foundation of everything that band was, and what made him so great was built on his unique ability to play. And then out of nowhere, out of the structure that he built, take you somewhere with a solo and bring you right back into the groove.
Yeah.
He gave almost like an assist artist, like a Magic Johnson. He could score, but he's also building everybody else up. He's giving space for the horns to do their thing, giving space for other musicians, the drummer, the bass, to really shine.
Yeah.
He was really unique talent, and unfortunately was taken too
If you're a
soon.
musician, if you talk music with people a lot from a musician standpoint, or you're just really a fan of elite musicianship, certain circles will bring up Terry Kath. He gets mentioned.
It would have been interesting to know where they could have gone if he hadn't his demise. I believe he was goofing around with a gun he didn't think was loaded, and they again another band where they have a really great documentary made about them in the early years and on throughout them being in the Rock and Roll
Do you
Hall of
remember what
Fame.
that's called?
I do not.
Dang. Well,
I know,
find the Chicago documentary.
It's on one of those streaming services
They
that
were a very unique band.
every human has nowadays.
They're a band that DJs dig for. They're a band that people who love, black funk and soul music love Chicago.
It shouldn't work. It shouldn't work. A blistering guitar solo in the middle of this pseudo hard rock, jazz funk fusion, horns. Like on paper, you're like, "There's no way," and then he melts your face off, and you're like, "Wow." Yeah.
Definitely listen to that guy. Listen to this guy. Both of them.
Are you trying in your mind? Are you trying to figure out what number 1 is?
I'm trying to figure it out. I have an idea.
Do you?
Yeah. I mean, I might have gotten a little peek over there, but
So you know.
well, maybe. But you throw me. You definitely
No,
throw
you
me
know
off
I'm right.
sometimes. But if I'm right,
You agree,
it's a righteous pick.
right?
Super righteous pick. All right, this one is a little outsider, and it things had to kind of stew in my mind and percolate, and kind of this last night I'm listening to some of the things on my list, and I just went, this guy has to be in the list. First of all, I'm going to tell you that he came in number 99th on Rolling Stone's 100 Greatest Guitarists of All Time. So right there, that's a reason why he's underrated. 99th?
I don't put any stock in anything Rolling
Well,
Stone
that's
says.
fair enough. Yeah, but
Rolling Stone hated
just-
Rush.
yeah,
Need I say more?
I'm not putting a ton of stock in Rolling Stone either,
I wouldn't even wipe my
But-
butt with Rolling Stone.
but they did make a list of 100 greatest guitar players. You know, most of them are pretty on point.
Yeah.
Okay, this is one of my favorite guitar players of all time, Greg Ginn from Black Flag.
I feel like you're being the contrarian today, and I'm playing it safe. I almost should have went way out of the box because your picks are so.
You could call it contrarian. I mean, you picked Winger.
I picked Winger, and you pick a punk legend.
But I like where you're coming from, though.
I feel like I'm basking in the glow of your eminence today.
I think picking Winger is
amazing.
just fine because you're trying to expose people to something they might not otherwise
Expose yourself to
investigate.
art.
Yeah, man. So, Greg Ginn starts Black Flag in 1976. Same time that you've got the Ramones. And then you get the UK punk scene happening. But Greg Ginn could almost single-handedly be responsible for hardcore punk, amongst some other people, but 76 is pretty early for Los Angeles hardcore punk. He started SST Records, which put out a whole bunch of radical bands. Okay, so you got to listen to Greg Ginn. He's just very unique. Doesn't play like anybody else.
He is one of those guys that he's driven by his own unique intelligence.
There you go. That's
He's a
good.
very cerebral, and
Very
you wouldn't think
cerebral.
that for a punk guy, but he's
Yeah.
super intelligent.
That's a very good
and
point.
he is very, but that's one of those things that drives people
Yeah.
away from him, especially band members.
He doesn't have a great reputation as someone to work with.
But Black Flag is
Um,
brilliant.
One of the most important bands.
But thankfully, he does have an abrasive personality, because without it, we might not have got Circle Jerks.
Possibly,
who I
yeah.
love.
Circle Jerks rule. So one of the unique things about Greg Ginn is that he starts this kind of hardcore punk sound, but his influences were free jazz and heavy psychedelic stuff. He openly talked about the Grateful Dead being one of his favorite bands.
Because he's smart. I told you he was smart.
Yeah, so he found a way to incorporate psychedelic lead guitar work and free jazz and at some point even kind of doomy guitar style, kind of post-Sabbathy kind of stuff into this hardcore punk realm. But probably his most out there guitar playing would be during the era of Black Flag with Henry Rollins.
Probably the most famous of
Kinda-
eras of that.
Definitely. Leading into that, maybe during this period when they had Des Cadena filling in on vocals for Black Flag. So they were doing some material, getting a little more out there.
Slip in
Oh
over
yeah.
here
I just
and-
brought one example here. This is just my all-time favorite Black Flag record, which is their
This is a great record.
their last live offering. I just think they're just at a peak of form
If
here.
you've listened to this album, you know who has the 10.5.
You definitely
And
know
it's
that.
not who you think it would be.
So let's just say 4 key albums in that Rollins era where if you want to know what I'm talking about, you need to listen to those records and listen to what Greg Ginn is doing on them, or this for that matter. The stuff he's doing in this performance is just out of this world to me. So My War, Slip It In, Loose Nut, and In My Head are essential Black Flag records that display all of this stuff that make him one of the most unique, standout, interesting guitar players, in my opinion.
I don't want to give away too much because inevitably we're going to get to a punk, picking out favorite punk bands and everything. But there's early punk, if you will, had a very set, chord structure and think almost Ramones-ish kind of style of playing. And he broke that mold with a sledgehammer. And was a very unique style of, and you have to get this record, and I think you have to actually buy I have the CD, but you almost have to buy the record, and if you know these bands and you love these bands, you gotta have it just so you have a picture of Henry Rollins with long hair. If you're a fan of Henry Rollins, you know how unique that is.
That's another brilliant thing about this era of Black Flag is, Greg Ginn right there had long hair too. They all kind of decided, let's let our hair grow. We're still hardcore punks. We're still radical. They probably even, make fun of the hippies that still existed at that time.
You couldn't put them in a mold. And if my memory serves correctly, Greg's brother was the architect behind a lot of their art and their album covers and all that stuff. And he is very much in the vein of Greg, where they are incredibly intelligent, incredibly unique artists, and very abrasive human beings.
Very intelligent.
Henry Rollins tells a story that you couldn't say to his brother, hey, this is kind of what we're thinking about for an album or for a flyer or whatever. He would take that as a personal insult. And then he said there was times where they would be posting flyers for their performances and they would have dicks all over them because he got mad at somebody suggesting you should try to draw something.
Right.
But very unique.
Yeah, I don't even know if those brothers
talk anymore.
Yeah, for years I don't think they've been
hated each other.
Friends with each other.
Some people just don't get along.
Greg Ginn, important guitar player. We're at your number one already.
Death is coming for us all, as we've learned from the passing of Kobe and his extremely young daughter. You can do everything right, you can do everything wrong. It doesn't matter. Either way, it's all going to end up the same. And death speaks prominent into my second pick as well as my first pick. Second for what was taken away. First kind of for shining a light. An important death kind of shone a light, if you will, onto a very unique player that I don't believe gets the credit he is due. So in 1982-ish, I think, Randy Rhoads dies. And there's a huge void left. And obviously Ozzy's solo band, but the metal world entirely, another kind of classical. So they bring in Bernie Tormé to kind of fill in that gap. And it doesn't work out.
Okay.
Too blues based, too I don't have the album, but I'll bring out the concert video that you really need to see this man in his peak perfection. But it didn't work out. So Brad Gillis comes in, plays in this band, records Speak of the Devil, and then leaves and forms Night Ranger.
Okay.
Another band right in that hard rock groove, brilliant musicianship, screaming guitars, all the things you want and feel good rock. And then they recorded a song called Sister Christian, and it's over for them.
That is a great
because that's the only thing anybody ever mentions.
Except people should know their theme song, Night Ranger.
You can still rock in America. And you can buy this, put this on, watch
Brad
this
Gillis
man.
Is...
So he's really the guy that had to go out there every single night, replacing the legend Randy Rhoads, and take that. Who's got shoulders wide enough? Gillis has shoulders. Not only his shoulders are wide enough, his playing ability is so good that he's
I listened
the
to
reason.
This album a lot, double live album, when I was younger. and I just loved it. But one thing, I don't know if you were going to mention or not, he's not only filling in for Randy Rhoads, but the majority of this is Black Sabbath material.
Yeah, there was like a contractual obligation that he had to do an album for somebody, so they pumped out all these Sabbath songs.
I was mesmerized when I was young because I felt like I was enjoying listening to Ozzy do these Sabbath tunes as much as listening to Black Sabbath at the time. Like,
Yeah.
you know.
He also has a unique tie to Fiona. That name keeps coming up. He was on the Heart Like a Gun album.
Okay.
That album was kind of studio.
Right.
The producer put a bunch of studio musicians to back her
Yeah.
voice. He was one of them, and he also doesn't get credit, nor does the metal community get credit for their service to others. When you think about the '80s and you think about songs made to give money to people, you think of "We Are the World."
Yeah.
What you don't think of is "Hearing Aid."
Hearing Aid.
"We Are Stars," written by Ronnie James Dio, but he was one of the prominent guitar
Okay.
players
Yeah.
in that. And you got to listen to the long track that has all the guys soloing on it and all the
Yeah.
musicianship of that
I have
era.
that record.
But very slept on guy. Like when you think about Ozzy, most people say it's Randy, and then right after Randy was Jakey Lee. But that is not the case, my
Yeah.
friends. Brad Gillis was the
No.
man.
Was Brad Gillis in any other prominent bands before?
He's done the Night Ranger thing. He was just more of a studio guy,
That'd
and
be-
then hooks up.
Yeah.
I don't know what he was doing before that to get on the radar, but thankfully he did, and then goes his own way and does the Night Ranger thing, who's still rocking in
And
America.
I see where you're going with that. You know, somebody that you kind of need to unearth. Somebody that's kind
that
of
you might have heard, but you just
lurking in the
quite don't
shadows.
know.
Yeah. Very.
Like, give him some love, shine a light.
All right. I deliberated over where to put this person in my list, and also I'll say this honestly: my top 5 isn't necessarily in order. It doesn't have to be.
It could have shifted. It could
yeah.
move. It's always
but
like that. How do you feel today?
I think I put this person at number 1 because it's one of the first artists to come to my mind when I think about somebody who doesn't get revered for their guitar playing enough, who's known as one of the greatest rock artists of the last 50 years, written ridiculous, copious amounts of brilliant songs, album after album for 50 years, worked with other notable big-time artists of the 60s. But his guitar playing it's otherworldly to me. That's a word I like to use sometimes. I find his guitar playing to be otherworldly, full of feeling, full of emotion, more than technical ability. And I was listening to some of his noteworthy tunes in terms of best guitar solos of his career. And I was trying to think in my mind, how do I describe the way he handles his guitar, the way he rips out these solos, and it's almost as if he's plucking really hard, but then trying to hold back the sound from reverberating off the strings. It's this very kind of tight way that he plays guitar. Anyway, Neil Young. You knew what I was going
brought
to
it
say, Neil.
right back in, and you went right back out into left field.
You know, he definitely was regarded. Again, I'll refer to Rolling Stone's list of 100 greatest guitar players. He's in the list.
The Rolling Stones'
people-
100 greatest guitar players has no more relevance than me going to a homeless dude down the street and asking him what his favorite 100 guitar players are. I put no more. The Grammys, I don't put any reverence in that.
That sounds
or
kind of mean.
But it's true.
Actually.
Who is Rolling Stone? Nobody's. We
Fine.
make them who they are.
That's fine.
But this is why his stuff with Crazy Horse is where I can logically see where you're going with it. Because if not, if it's just his solo stuff, we'll argue all day
Well,
because he can't hold a candle to anyone else on our list.
when you're talking about Neil playing acoustic guitar as an accompaniment to any of his solo songs, yeah, I wouldn't necessarily point to that as really exemplifying what we're talking about here today. But there's a lot of Neil Young guitar solos throughout his career, playing electric guitar with Crazy Horse. And
I love Crazy Horse. He was a monster with Crazy Horse. But I think maybe you could have put him in the honorable mentions and then brought Malcolm Young, and I would have had less of an issue.
I'm
with
sorry, man, but listen to his
Win Me
guitar
Over.
work. When you're listening to Neil Young,
Yeah.
zero in on what he's
I
doing.
think every
on the
time
guitar.
I go into an elevator, there's a smooth jazz version of Cinnamon Girl or something.
That has nothing to do with this.
Yeah.
I'm sure there's a smooth jazz version of
There isn't. There
Winter's
is not.
Song.
No, there isn't. Nope.
Yeah, some.
But I mean, we could stack the two of them up
some
and see
instrumental
who,
White Snake in the elevator.
that you might see. That's 100. You're going to see it on a commercial
There is
for
a
sure
fair
because
chance.
David Coverdale is a money whore.
So, a word that might be used to describe his guitar playing is minimal. He was kind of a less is more, but that's the point.
He's a less is more because he can't.
That's the point. But is that the point of what makes someone a brilliant musician, a brilliant guitar player? I don't know.
I don't know either.
I think having a recognizable feel to your playing, the tone. I'm telling you, just zero in on what Neil does on guitar and listen to some of these songs that actually feature some guitar solos. Cinnamon Girl, Down by the River, Southern Man. One that is just a legendary guitar piece by Neil Young, Cortez the Killer, Like a Hurricane, Hey Hey My My, Powderfinger, Keep on Rockin' in the Free World.
Now you finally hit a vein where I can be like, oh man, you finally named a good song.
Well, and when you get to the late 80s, into the 90s, Neil
Like
really
go into your
started
grandparents' record collection, you'll probably find some Neil Young.
he really started to go deep in the 90s on kind of pushing his approach to kind of choking out some intense guitar leads.
Yes, I liked that era of his political, in your face.
Yeah.
This is what's wrong with the record industry and the
So
entertainment
start there.
industry.
Start
and
there.
I,
Listen
I
to what he's doing
love
on
I love
guitar
his
there.
harder edged Crazy Horse
But the
stuff.
song that I want everyone to go listen to is from his 1996 album with Crazy Horse called Broken Arrow. The song's called Loose Change. It just has this 6 minutes of a dirgy one-note bass line where Neil just does what he does, which is why he's topping my list today as a beautiful, standout, underrated guitar player.
If you would have offered
So
me
you don't like it,
$100
You can just take a hike.
to try to pick what your top pick would have been, I would have lost like
Yeah.
$1,000. But that's why you're the professor. That's why you need to come down here and pick this guy's brain for unique knowledge.
But you have your own well of interesting things that you brought up today.
Yeah.
And stuff that I couldn't have predicted. Stuff that I think...
You probably could have predicted it, but
Well,
but you're very nice.
I could not have, but I think that watch this multiple times. Take notes on Greg's list. There's some great
Take
stuff
notes.
you ought to investigate there.
We gotta.
All right, what time is it?
We got some feedback to leave our lists in the bottom of the. So I'm gonna start leaving lists, but don't go there first. Don't spoiler alert yourself. Speaking of things that you need to come down here and take a look at, who remembers 45s? He's got a huge selection of 45s down here. The 45s are the greatest because you got to see super cool art or different pictures, and
especially when you got
look
the
how-
cool picture sleeves.
how gorgeous Paula Abdul was.
Well,
Yes, you're gorgeous, Paula.
We have
I'm
punk
sorry.
45s. We have
It's
classic
amazing.
rock 45s.
Police.
But we just got in a big batch of 80s picture sleeve 45s. So come on, we need some of those.
Sonic Youth, another guitar player that might have could have made it. Some Belinda.
Talked about the Go-Go's last time.
Another hugely
This
slept
guy,
on
I consider.
musician of the grunge era, Jerry.
We'll talk
in
about
that
him.
vein.
We will talk about him.
This
at
is a
another time.
brilliant album. You got to come. And
I can't believe that
Hey,
you found this.
you have to come pick this up.
God, he doesn't. He's looking almost like he does.
Well,
right
that's
now.
from. They just took that from like Let's Get Popular. If you haven't seen this movie, Brotherhood of Justice, that's just him from like The Matrix or something.
Oh, this is a
But
collection of.
this
films.
is a 7-movie, 8-movie collection. But don't worry about everything else. It's
Yeah.
just Brotherhood of
I
Justice.
mean, obviously they put that really big on
Yeah,
the front.
it's it was a made-for-television movie with him and Billy Zane
Keanu Reeves.
and
or I'm sorry, Kiefer Sutherland.
Kiefer Sutherland, Lori Loughlin was in it. A bunch of other really mainstays from the '80s within it.
What movie was Lori Loughlin in? Killer cult film from our era before she joined Full House.
Illuminate.
BMX film.
Rad.
Yes, indeed.
Very nice. BMX Bandits was kind of where
Yeah,
I
BMX
leaned.
Bandits. Oh, really?
Yeah, I love that movie. But this movie, the basic storyline is they're in high school and they go to an affluent
Yeah.
high school and it gets vandalized, so they decide they're going to take justice into their own hands and form this gang that gets rid of drug dealers
Yeah.
and all that goes wrong with it. Awesome, very underrated, unheralded.
But even
movie
though
from
they're
the
the brother
80s,
of justice,
They are the
are
Brotherhood
they
of
taking
Justice.
it too far?
I don't know, but I'm going to
You'll have
go.
to watch it and find out.
I'm gonna. You saw my reaction when I found
I
it.
know.
I'm gonna tell you just slightly that the Metal Maniac and I used to watch this movie and be like, "That's not a bad idea. We could totally do that."
Well,
So, you know, kids, don't let the music influence you, but
Yeah.
the movies are fine.
I would trust you guys.
I know, right?
All right. I didn't pick too many things, but some things that recently came in that I want to highlight. Don't get enough of this in the store on vinyl. Trojan Records Dub Collection Volume 1. You want this. You're going to want to come in really soon before someone else gets this classic stuff. Here's a couple things.
Yeah.
Fear, the record, the first Fear album, just one of my favorite
Such a
records
great
of all
record.
time.
Lee
Punk
Bing
or
is a
no punk.
Lee Bing is a
Just-
legend.
Just is a monster, kick your ass record. And then this record, Fang, Fang's seminal kind of post-hardcore, kind of. It's not sludge, it's not doom, but it's just kind of grimy and sludgy post-hardcore weirdo punk rock record called Landshark. Nirvana did a cover of one of their songs back in the day.
Yeah, if you had this on CD, I'd steal it.
Just a couple jazz things I wanted to highlight. I don't know why. I have several Cal Tjader records sitting in my bin. They should never sit there for very long. Cal Tjader was just a wonderful, just kind of, I don't want to say, kind of a light jazz, kind of cocktail jazz. Did a lot of Latin stuff.
Put it on in the
vibraphone.
background while you're doing.
Yeah, but then it'll seep into
awesome
your
stuff.
brain and you'll go, this guy is
This
wicked,
guy's
man.
pretty
This guy's
awesome."
wicked. Need to come down and get some of my Cal Tjader. And then another jazz artist, speaking of underrated, Mose Allison. You know, in a certain circle, people are going to know Mose. They're going to go, Mose Allison was the shit. Kind of coming from this kind of beat era, just kind of his own unique thing. He was a jazz songwriter, but unlike anybody else, really. Just
Pretty cool, pretty cool.
kind of a snazzy vocal quality, and just kind of a hipster. Just Mose Allison. You just got to check him out. Anyway, those are my picks of things that should not be.
However you're
sitting here.
consuming us, whatever you're watching on, however you get to us, thank you for spending your time with us. Hit like, subscribe, share with all your friends. For the Metal Maniac, the Emperor of Esoteric, and myself, Skip Bayless of Music Television, we will see you again later this week.